Hello everybody, I'm Nick and welcome to the third episode of Content Cop, the series where we take a look at bad advice, usually from LinkedIn, Twitter or blog posts, and we try to basically turn them into good advice. There's tons of bad advice out there and LinkedIn specifically will promote anything, and in this video specifically what I want to do is take one of those really bad and harmful pieces of advice that can really harm the performance of your application and try to explain why it is so bad and you should not follow it under any circumstances. As always, this is not a dig to the creator themselves. In fact, everything is anonymized. This is just about criticizing the advice itself and trying to turn this into good advice. If you like that of content and you want to see more, make sure you subscribe for more training. Check out my courses on dometrain.com. Okay, so what is this advice I'm talking about? Well, this is the photo that was posted without really any meaningful context. And the idea is that, hey, if you're not actually going to use a parameter in your structured logs, then maybe don't have it in the template. Now, the reasoning for this is to not add overhead specifically. So it's about performance. Now, trust me when I say this advice, the one that says you should not actually use a template, but instead use string interpolation or concatenation to just use it as a plain text string, it's going to very noticeably harm your application in terms of performance and overhead. The good advice is the exact opposite of what the advice is trying to get you to do, and I will explain why. Let's go to the IDE. Now, I've brought in the exact same example as it was on that photo, and I want to very quickly explain what structured logging is. So when you have a log information, log warning, or anything, this thing over here, this is not the message, but this is the message template. If you want to pass parameters to that template, then you can do that by using a comma separated list of parameters after that. And if you do that, what's going to happen is those parameters will be captured and then they can be dealt with in different ways. For example, if you use a JSON provider for your logs, they can be handled as individual parameters in JSON, so you can do some filtering later. And if you're using something like application insights or Datadog, those will be passed as individual fields in Datadog or whatever else you use as your login provider. Now, I'm someone who has really dived into logging in .NET and basically mastered the topic and know exactly how it works behind the scenes. And in fact, I have a 1 hour long talk on the subject, which you can check later. I'm going to put a link in the description down below. It's from NDC conferences where I run talks and workshops, but I also have a full-length course on logging on Dometrain. So everything I'm going to explain in this video comes from hands-on experience. Now, let me get one thing out of the way. As you can see in the example over here, the creator is using the .where link method to filter the items based on the category. The problem with this is that if you do a .count to get the count of the items and then return them, you open yourself up to multiple enumeration. And that's exactly what Rider is actually telling me here. It's telling me that whatever is in here will be enumerated multiple times. Now, in this case, it won't really be that bad, but we're gonna waste memory, which we probably don't need to waste. You can easily fix that by forcing some enumeration either to a list or some other type that you might want to return as well. So I'm going to use that in both examples because these squiggly lines really bothered me. And now that we actually change this to list, we can remove the method over here because we can just get the count from the already enumerated list. Now let's take a look at the two examples. The point the creator is trying to make is that using structured logging, presumably because it will store that parameter, will actually have some overhead. We're going to have to name this parameter, and we're also going to have to store the count. In this case, that is an integer. So not a big value, but a value nonetheless. The alternative is to not store it at all, so not give it a name, not treat it as a special thing, and just inline it over here. So what is going to happen in here is that my string template, when it's computed, let's say I want to have one item, is something like this. But here's the interesting thing. If this has an amount of different parameters, because each category can have different numbers of items within it, then I'm going to have n different types of strings for this concatenated string. And these are unique strings that are not interned, so they are allocated every single time this method is called. You can have n amount of combinations here, and what's going to happen is you're going to have this and this over here as compile time literals, so they're only going to be allocated once at compile time, but the combination of the two strings and the parameter over here will generate one unique string every time you call it. And even if something comes in and it has the exact same item count, you're still gonna allocate a new string, even if it already exists in memory, because this string will not actually be interned altogether. It will be allocated every single time. The benefit of using structured logging over here and treating this as a template is that this string will only be allocated once. You won't have any amount of combination of these parameters that could potentially change how many times this is allocated. And since this is a compile time literal, it will be intent, and every time we come in here, we're gonna point at the same location in memory. Now, I do wanna point something out. It is up to the provider itself, which is basically where the log will end up into, to take these parameters and try to be efficient with them. Some of them will actually replace these parameters at runtime before they send them to the provider. Some of them will not do that though, and they will do the computation on the provider, saving you that memory. Even if you think at this point right now that you're not going to use one parameter at some point for your logs, you should still use structured logging. If it's that unimportant that you think you won't filter by it, don't add it in the log. Let's just say found items of the category and move on with your life. I don't understand the point where you don't want to actually make use of it, because you might not want to make use of it now, but when the time comes in the future and you are asked by business to, hey, we want to see how many this per category we have in the logs, then you're going to have to go back and try to, I don't know, write some regex to make sense of all this. And it's going to be way, way worse. Also, if you want to be even more efficient with your logs, especially using the built-in logger, I highly recommend you use the source-generated logger. And in case you don't know what that is, dotnet allows you to use the logger message attribute on a partial method to turn it into effectively a logging method. And by doing that, you're allowing the source generator to write the most optimized code it can for the type of thing you want to log. So you won't have any boxing, which will actually happen here, because as we can see in this log information method, the parameters are passed as a params object array, which will cause boxing and it will cause extra allocations. But if you are to use the source generated logger, you won't have that issue, because generics will be used behind the scenes. Plus you're gonna have a tailor-made method for that log, and that will even remove the minimal overhead you might have by using the built-in log information and passing these parameters down with structured logging. There is no scenario where if you want to pass down a parameter in your message template, you want it to be a raw string, especially if it changes the template. If it was a constant that never changed, then sure. But if it was a constant, why would you not have it as part of the template? This advice is very harmful. It will cause many memory allocations around strings, and strings are very expensive. In fact, if you take a look at how much .NET has been optimized, a lot of that is due to span, which allows you to do some fancy allocations around strings, which basically prevents them and optimizes them. So please do use structured logging. Even if you don't take my course to see how you can do this efficiently and effectively, or you don't watch my talk, just know that this is a message template. Even though Microsoft tells you it's the message, no, it is not. As you can see over here on my ID, Ryder has a different opinion. It is the structured message template. But now I want to know from you, did you know about all the memory issues you can have if you use string concatenation in your logger message template? And are you using structured logging? If yes, with what provider are you using it? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, keep coding.